Hello, my darlings. Welcome to the video. I'm gonna open up the topic today of history. Human history, as in this humanity, Earth's humanity. And I say Earth's humanity because this is not the only humanity. Again, this is a woo-woo channel. If you're a historian, official, like if you're into history and you stumbled across this channel, this is not for you. Leave. Okay. This is for woo-woo people. I don't like that term, but... So, the actual history of humanity, outside what official history talks about. I said that there are multiple humanities, to say so. And it's not just this planet that was inhabited in this solar system alone. It was also Mars, inhabited by humans. Their incarnation was like ours, their type of incarnation. And there were also humans on Venus. Long time ago. Now, there are other beings on other planets like the Pleiadians who are very much like humans, but we wouldn't necessarily call them humans. Like, they're Pleiadians, but they look a lot like our type of incarnation. Like, their bodies look a lot like ours. Now, other kinds of aliens, of other types of incarnations from other planets, are a bit different. So, focusing on Earth's humanity and the history of this species alone, it's a lot more than what official history would have you believe. And it's quite vast. Now, there are segments to this history and different time periods and different versions of the human incarnation, because humans have not always been so dense. Like, the body itself hasn't always been so dense and so anchored into material world. There was a time when humans were a lot more spiritual and a lot more anchored into the spiritual world rather than the physical. I'm gonna talk about all of this. Now, this is not to say that official history is not to be looked at, because there is truth to that as well. I mean, the closer it is to us, the official history is a bit more loyal, more accurate. But the further we go back into the past, official history just loses the scope of how humans actually were like. And that's because the more we go back into history, the more humans, like the more different they were compared to humans today. The world, the environment was a lot more different. Their mentalities and ideas were a lot different, and so on. Just everything was different. And like I said, even their type of incarnation, like their bodies, were different. Now, there have been multiple people of the last century that tried to explain all of this. I'm not necessarily into the way they explained stuff. So I'll just show you things in my way, to say so. And again, there are more segments to history. Now, what I want to start with, and something that I believe we should all focus on as, incarnate as humans, is the way humans appeared, basically. Different religions will have you believe that humans were just spat into existence by a solely masculine god. And that's not the case. And then again, science would have you believe that humans just evolved out of other species, out of hominids. And it's not true. That's not the case. So, the way humans appeared as a species, the way the human incarnation was envisioned, it was long before human souls existed. It was envisioned by creator beings, what ancient worlds called gods and goddesses. And there are multiple layers of the hierarchy of the spirit world. And there are multiple levels of creation. So we have the one creator being, the primordial being. And from the one being come other gods and goddesses. And from them, another generation of gods and goddesses, and so on. There are multiple generations of gods and goddesses, creator beings. And then from them comes the world that you see, the world of, like the manifested world, and the world of free will that we live in. And the form, to say so, of this type of incarnation was envisioned by those creator beings long before the existence of the human souls. Now, human souls themselves come from the sun. Each soul group that pertains to a planet is seeded by the sun of that solar system for that planet. And it's seeded with the sun and the planet. But this is a feminine planet. So it's seeded by the sun for the earth. All the souls of the human collective, this particular human collective, come from this sun of the solar system. They were created within the sun. Now, when I say within the sun, I mean the actual being who is the sun God. And I recently had a conversation with someone, and he was like, nobody knows what the sun is. No, yes, we know what the sun is, okay? Just because you don't know doesn't mean other people don't. The sun is the bridge between consciousness and the material world, between the spirit world and the material world. And he is an actual being. So is Gaia, so are the other planets. Now, in every solar system, there are going to be planets that are going to be inhabited and or planets that are not going to be inhabited. So, each solar system has its own life. And long before we have soul groups seeded for certain planets within a solar system, we have the existence of the solar system, like before planets are inhabited. And only, like for most solar systems, only some of those planets will be inhabited. The beings that come incarnate as those suns and planets, they take turns in different eras of their own, in different incarnations of their own. They have a dance of their own. So it can happen that a planet, like a being who comes incarnate as a planet somewhere, will be the same being that in another solar system is the sun of that solar system. Vice versa, our sun could be a planet in another solar system, even though he's not. He's not, because he is one of the very important and ancient being, one of the most important and most ancient beings in creation. Yes, this sun, this very sun. And in ancient times, he was known as, he had many names throughout different mythologies: Horus, Apollo, Helios, Baldur, Vishnu, because Vishnu is the sun. Now, he seeded the human souls, and they come from him. And they descended upon the earth, from the sun upon the earth. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that they just, like, in space, they came literally from the sun through all the distance from the sun to the earth. They just traveled through that emptiness of space till they reached earth. That's not how it happened. So they existed within the sun, and then they, like, you can imagine something like some sort of teleportation. Like, they existed within the sun, and when I say within the sun, I don't necessarily mean him as he is incarnate as the sun. I mean him as the soul who is the sun. But it's kind of like both. They existed both within him in the spirit world and somewhat within him where he is incarnate as the sun. Somewhat. I hope you understand what I mean. And then he kind of like opened up the gates from that inner dimension for them to come incarnate, to exist into the manifested world of the free will, which is our world that we live in today. But that was long ago. Prior to that moment, like I said, the planets had already existed in the solar system. Every solar system needed time of its own for the planets to get accommodated within the solar system and to get used to the dance that they have amongst themselves before they get inhabited. So finally, there came the time when Earth was about to be inhabited. But it wasn't just about to be it, like boom, and then voila, the manifested world. Dense material world. That's not how it happened. Because it's too much of a transition and it's too stretched for these souls. Because these souls at that time were just like new souls, baby souls. They were just stepping into the material world. It was their first time into the material world. So if they were to come incarnate into bodies like ours today, it would have been too much of a difference, because they had just been created. Well, not necessarily. So souls, when they are created, the souls that pertain to a group of souls, a collective. They're not just created and then the next second, boom, sent into the free will universe. Because that's too much of a shock. It's like giving birth to a baby and making them walk the very next second. So they're created, and for a while they sit within the creator being and within the spirit world. So they are kind of like nested in the spirit world, which is cute. And they're baby souls. This is so cute. And only some of them will come into the material world. It's not always the case that for every collective of souls, all the souls that were created as that collective, come incarnate. It's not all of them that come incarnate. Like, for most collectives, some of these souls choose to never come incarnate, to just stay in the spirit world. But if they choose that, they'll just forever be at that level of baby souls. They will not experience individuality. They will not have a will of their own. They will continue to be like I said, like baby souls, always in the nest of their collective and their creator being. Which, I don't blame them. Considering what happens in the free will universe, I don't blame them for choosing that. Okay. But this is the thing. The moment they choose that, there are two moments they are given that choice. The first moment is when the sun, like I said, opens the gates from the dimension where they exist initially, where they are nested within the sun, and then they come in, they're allowed to walk upon the earth plane. And when they do that as souls. First of all, the first time they do that, they don't come incarnate. They are they come from the sun into the world of the planet. And it's kind of like they walk around the planet. It's kind of like the Garden of Eden. It's like the primordial state of the planet, that uninhabited planet. Uninhabited by this type of beings, by a leading species. The planet had vegetation. The planet had hospitable life conditions at that time. A lot of vegetation, a lot of beautiful scenery and weather and all of that, and everything was beautiful. So at that time, they kind of walk as much as they can across the earth. They're allowed to walk in different continents, in different, the continents weren't exactly as they are today, because the earth, just like we change throughout a lifetime, so does she. But, for us, the changes of the earth are, for us they happen too slow to notice, unless we intervene and change nature ourselves, which we shouldn't do. Okay, so they were allowed to walk across the earth. They were allowed to experience different climates, different geographical zones, to see which ones they feel more in tune with, which ones they would choose to have more incarnations in, to basically have a taste of that world and see it and feel it. And then, so before that happens, they're given a choice. All of the souls of the collective, they're given the choice. Hey, so we're opening up the gates towards the material world now, the world of the free will. This is the planet that's going to be your planet, the planet of your collective. What do you say? Do you want to explore it in the state that you are into right now? The state of pure spirit. They were just exploring at that time. Usually, when this happens for collectives, most of them choose to explore it. It's very few within different collectives that don't even take that chance, and right away they say that they don't want to come incarnate at all, they don't want to explore the free will universe at all, they just want to stay in spirit forever. And for the human collective, like, it was three souls that right away they just said, no, we want to stay here, we don't even want to try. Okay, so so usually it's kind of like that. It's 2, 3, 4 souls, 5, 6 souls within certain collective. It can get like even to 10, 11 souls, but like 16, 17, but it's never more than 20. Like, I'm getting the message that it was once for one collective 24, and that was the highest ever, the highest number. 24 souls was like, no. So these are the numbers I got for different collectives. For humanity, it was 3. So they explored the earth in that state of pure spirit. They could see one another, but there was no evil back then, basically. So it was beautiful. And they were allowed to do that. Now, at that point, they didn't even have a sense of time like we have now. So they were just allowed to explore, and what one soul would have explored and what we, like, let's say one soul would have taken like 3 days to explore, another soul would have taken like 4 weeks. But for them, it was kind of like the same time, because time was volatile back then. It was not linear and so rigid and unbreakable as it is for us today. So that happened. After that initial phase of discovery and getting accustomed to the material world and the planet, and the vegetation of the planet and the vibe of the planet, basically. And she was very happy to do this. She was very happy to receive her babies and commune with them. Well, she was already in communion with them from before, but it was happening a lot more into the free will universe now. So after this initial phase of discovery, there was a council again, and they were given the final choice. So, okay, you've seen how the earth looks like in its primordial state, in its original state, uninhabited, just the earth by herself, just how beautiful she can be. What say you now? Do you want to continue this? Do you want to continue existing in the material world, in the free will universe, but go through the world of incarnations and be bound to the world of incarnations and life and death cycles, which is called samsara, and get to know stuff, be individualized, have a mind of your own and a will of your own, because this is a free will universe. And that's what being individualized as a soul means. Getting to have a mind of your own and a will of your own. And what do you choose to do with this? Do you choose evil? Do you choose good? And that's that is actually what the myth of the Garden of Eden hints at in the Bible. Because in the Bible there's this notion of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. Like, there's no apple. If you read the Bible, Eve doesn't bite an apple. It's never stated what kind of fruit it is, as in, is it an apple? Is it a strawberry? Is it a pear? Is it a grape? Is it what kind of fruit it is, as in like an actual fruit? But the name of that fruit is the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. That's what Eve takes a bite of, and Adam as well. So that's basically what happens for humanity from that point onward. It's no longer the Garden of Eden. It's no longer just pure paradise. The material world existing in full union with the spirit world and full alignment with the spirit world. But from that moment onwards, humanity can have knowledge, but knowledge of both good and evil. And also free will to choose one of the two. So basically this is the major quest of the free will universe. That's why souls get... It's not the only reason, but it's the major quest of the free will universe for souls who come incarnate and then are bound to samsara. What do you choose? Do you choose good? Do you choose evil? Because they can stay in the spirit world forever. Like I said, there are souls who choose that, but they will not be individualized and they will not necessarily have a will of their own. Their free will extends to that sole moment in time when they choose to not ever come incarnate in the free will universe. That's the extent of their free will. And they just stay in the spirit world where they are bound to the will of the one. Which seems a lot better of a choice. Because they're bound to the will of the one being. Who's absolute love and kindness and just pure perfection. But this is more of more the perspective of the divine feminine. The souls who choose that right away and choose to always be bound to the spirit world and never get outside of it, never come in the incarnate world, and always be in oneness, the total oneness of the spirit world. They are a lot more cherished by the divine feminine because they choose the divine feminine way right away, right from the moment they exist. They never choose individuality, they never choose a will of their own, which is masculine. The souls who choose that choose the more masculine way of going through life, going through existence, and like I said, a will of their own, a mind of their own, and a choice of their own. But then there are consequences coming from those choices. Now, a lot of souls don't fully grasp the meaning of that when they choose the material world. The souls who do choose the material world and finally make it after ages and ages and ages of continuous incarnations and failing and then going to hell and then coming incarnate again and then going through all of that and gaining karma and purging it and gaining karma and purging it and all of that. When they finally purge all of it and they go through lifetimes after lifetimes and after all of the trials and tribulations and the wrongdoings and the pain and the hurt and just all of the things of the material world, and they eventually choose by their own good and love and the things that basically the one being stands for, they are more cherished by the divine masculine, because they choose that by themselves, but only after they will have gone through a lot of things, through multiple incarnations, so that they gain the internal strength and wisdom to do that. This is not to say that, the souls who come in the free will universe are disliked by the divine feminine or anything like that. But it's just that the divine feminine will always appreciate the choice of choosing oneness right away. It makes sense. And this is exactly why it's the divine masculine who comes incarnate at different times to sacrifice himself for the world. You get Christ and you get Osiris. The divine masculine being sacrificed so that the world of the free will can still go on, so that the souls of the free will can continue to exist and learn, and then choose based on that. Because that's what he stands for, and that's what he wants souls to do, to choose kindness and good and love and illumination out of their own free will. Yeah. All right. So, coming back to the history of humanity. After that initial phase of the Garden of Eden, Earth being literally a paradise, like I said, in full union with the spirit world, Earth in her primordial state, and humans exploring Earth just in pure spirit form. Then they're given the choice, the final choice. Okay, so how many of you now choose to go incarnate and be individualized and be bound to samsara until you really integrate all of the things that you need to integrate through this journey? And how many of you choose to stay in the spirit world? And at that point, it was another 7 human souls who chose to just, okay, we got it, we saw it, we're grateful we've seen it, we walked through the Garden of Eden, but now that it's about to fall, and now that humanity is going to taste the fruit of knowledge of good and evil, we don't want that. I'm getting that there was one soul in particular in that whole scenario that was really rioted by this whole thing. He was like, no, not for me, not for me, not for me. Okay, so you have the 3 souls that choose to not even explore it in spirit form, and then the next 7 souls who chose to come back to the spirit world after they did that. All the other souls of the human collective chose to come incarnate. There are many. So for each collective, there are many souls. I'm sorry. All right. Now, the fall of humanity, that's when it happened, basically. But it wasn't an immediate fall into total darkness. It was progressive. regressive. Alright, so like I said, the rest of the souls of the human collective chose to come incarnate and be part of samsara. Samsara, like I said, means the cycle of life and death, the material world. And then we have another form of incarnation which starts to be more physical. Now, at that time, the initial stage of like when the souls were starting to explore the earth, it, like I said, it wasn't there. They didn't have bodies. Now, in the next phase, it's still mostly the soul, but it starts to develop a body. And that is another initial stage, to say so, when there wasn't birth, like they weren't birthed. They came again through the portal of spirit, and they started to roam the earth, and they lived they had a longer lifespan, and throughout that lifespan they started developing bodies. And you can imagine the bodies starting to form within the soul form, starting to form as a nucleus within the soul form, and then getting materialized. Alright. And this next version of humanity will be like this. It will be both spiritual and material, but more spiritual. Like the spiritual body will be more prevalent. The physical body is just starting to be shaped. They're starting to gain material form and material knowledge and consciousness of their existence as material beings, but there's not that much yet. And this is the time of Lemuria. That land, that beautiful, beautiful land that is just like paradise, but it's a bit different from Earth as a paradise, because it's like I said, they're starting to get progressively more and more material, but it wasn't quite bad, you know, like compared to how this world is today. I mean, okay, so the land of Lemuria, it like I said, the earth looked different throughout its multiple ages, and I said previously that in the first phase of humanity, when they were walking around the earth but in spirit form, the continents weren't exactly the way they are today. And I will clarify now what I meant. So, Lemuria, or the land of Mu, as some people call it. I love to call it Lemuria. It's a continent that existed somewhere in the Indian Ocean today, like where we see the Indian Ocean today. That's where Lemuria existed. It was kind of like between Madagascar and India and the Philippines and Australia and New Zealand, kind of like there. It was big. It was a very big continent. Now, the only remnant that we have today of that continent is India. India, the actual landmass of the Indian peninsula, is from Lemuria. Arguably Madagascar as well, but it's too small. Too small and too out of touch with how Lemuria was. The only land that is a remnant of old Lemuria, that counts as a remnant of old Lemuria, is the Indian peninsula. And I say that is the only remnant of Lemuria that counts because of Hindu literature and Hindu spirituality. Because literally, Hindu spirituality and literature talks about the times of Lemuria. This is something that most people don't get. And you see like stories of blue-skinned gods. Well, that is because people in ancient Lemuria had blue skin. Yes, yes, amazing, right? Lovely, amazing. I love it. People in ancient Lemuria had two types of skin. Blue skin or white skin, but it wasn't white like ours today. It was white like in a more like silver type of white. Like, it was quite interesting. And that's also why you get such stories of goddess Kali. When she becomes Kali, she turns like, it's not really blue. Her skin at that point, like most of the times, is depicted as blue, but if you read the actual texts, it's said that her skin was as dark as the darkest night. So it was like black, like black. And that's why her name is Kali, because Kali means the dark one. And well, she is dark and old. Meanings of the word. Because she is the one primordial feminine being. She is the total darkness of primordial existence. Perfection. Oh. But then it is said that she had blue skin afterwards, after that episode. And she wanted to regain her initial white skin. So she went through some tapas, which is some spiritual practices, like severe spiritual practices, in order to regain her beautiful white complexion that she had previous to that episode, when she had that powerful rage that turned her into her spirit self. Because basically what happens in that episode is that she is... So basically we have goddess Parvati trying to defeat some dark entities, and she is outnumbered, and she can't eliminate those beings, and she gets so enraged that she totally annihilates her physical body, and it's just the presence of her spiritual body there, and that's how she manages to eliminate the army of those dark entities. But then when she regains her like more physical body, now her skin is a bit darker and it's blue. But she wanted her skin to be like it was before. silvery white, and she goes through some tapa and she regains her beautiful white complexion, and that's why one of her titles in Hindu mythology is Gora Bhavani, which means the one of white complexion. And it's so beautiful. And a lot of people don't get the meaning of these stories. And a lot of people look at these stories like, oh, they're so supernatural and they're so imaginative and they're so like unreal. Because yes, for our world today, they are unreal. Because we cannot do these things anymore today in this type of incarnation, when the bridge between the worlds is a lot more solid, because our material existence is very material, like it's the most material, because humanity had already reached its most material existence. So when we're looking at how humans lived back then, of course for most people it just seems like pure fiction, but it's not. Now, it wasn't quite everyone that could do such things. Like, she could do that because she is the primordial being, the supreme goddess. But not all souls who came incarnate at that time could do such outstanding things. I mean, no one can do what she does, but but other beings could do things, amazing things as well, depending on their soul evolution, depending on how wise they were and how experienced they were. But most human souls back then, like I said, they were just starting to experience the world of incarnations and the world as it was for them at that point. Now, there were certain souls who were sages and yogis. They were already... some sages were already older souls, because when you come incarnate, like, you can come incarnate in the past, basically. So they still needed a few people amongst them to be a bit more experienced souls to guide them, to be like I said, like sages for them. But the vast numbers of the souls who were incarnate at that point were still new and still exploring. So that was Lemuria. And this is also the reason, one of the reasons why it was a lot more peaceful, at least in its first stage of existence. Because A, it was just humanity barely starting its existence into the free will universe. And B, Lemuria was the continent of the divine feminine. And the age of Lemurian humanity is an age of humanity in tune more with the spirit world and with divine feminine values. And that's also one of the reasons that, like, because they were still young souls and they were coming from this more feminine energy, many of them were a bit more gullible and they got fooled a bit easier by evil beings. That's also why at that time it was essential for many, many deities to be incarnate at that time amongst them to guard them. And like I said, this is exactly why you get so many stories throughout the Hindu scriptures of amazing beings. All right. Gradually, humanity became more and more material, and they got to a point when the relation between their spirit, their energy body, and their physical body was 50-50. They could have access to both bodies in equal amounts. But the more they began, the more their bodies, their physical bodies began being more and more solid, more and more material, the more humanity lost contact to all the features of their energy body and all the the prowesses that come from that. So gradually they dived into materiality, and with time, when money were introduced, because yes, there was a time when there weren't money. When money were introduced to humanity, you can imagine people got even more material, and even more like greediness appeared in human consciousness. And that's when a lot of people started doing a lot of bad stuff to other people because of their own greediness and stuff like that. By the way, talking about Hindu scriptures, there are also very wonderful episodes when such people are punished by the deities because of their actions, like immediately punished, like immediate karma. And I love those episodes. It's amazing. Okay. So this was humanity, the humanity of Lemuria. A type of humanity that was a lot more feminine and a lot more spiritual and a lot more in tune with their energy, bodies, and their spiritual selves. Eventually, Lemuria had to disappear. It had to make way for a new wave of human consciousness, a more masculine type of human consciousness. So, we get this initial stage of humanity. Like I said, it's humanity exploring the feminine way of life. And then Lemuria had to disappear. And most of the Lemurian souls, the human souls that came incarnate throughout the timeline of Lemuria, most of them made it into the spirit world. Most of them got out of the cycle of life and death just by coming incarnate throughout Lemuria. That's how powerful it was. Amazing. Now, those who didn't, even if they didn't get out of samsara, they were still very evolved souls. They still learned a lot, and they were still like very beautiful souls. And you might have heard of Lemurian seeds. They are the human souls of Lemuria who got to achieve a certain level of consciousness and wisdom. I'm hearing telepathy. That they didn't need to come incarnate in the next stages of humanity. So they left Earth, at least the surface Earth. Some of them left Earth entirely to come incarnate on other planets that were a lot more suitable for their way of life. Because again, they were given a choice. At this point, it wasn't a choice of getting out of samsara, because they had already made that choice of being bound to samsara until they reach the right point within themselves to get themselves out of samsara. This moment was a choice of, do you want to explore the masculine consciousness throughout Earth's humanity's evolution? Or do you want to continue on the path of divine feminine consciousness and keep coming incarnate in worlds that are more suitable for that, for you to explore that in a lot more peaceful worlds, a lot more loving and lovable worlds? And they chose that. Most of them chose that. So they went incarnate on other planets, in other environments and with other collectives that are more suitable for them to continue the path of living according to divine feminine notions and teachings and spirituality and values, and a divine feminine way of life. And most of them, like 70% of these souls, will always, like their whole existence throughout the free will universe, will be entirely dedicated to the divine feminine way of life. They don't want to explore the divine masculine way of life. They made their choice, so they left. Others chose to stay on Earth, but they got within the Earth. So as Lemuria got sunken, so did they get within the Earth, basically. And that's when the hollow Earth was formed. The hollow Earth is basically, Earth is a planet, but it's hollow inside. And there is life inside the Earth. It's not like what science teaches you with a core and magma and all of that. There's the inner Earth. And inner Earth is basically the continuation of old Lemuria. All those human souls of old Lemuria, and not just Lemurian souls, there are others as well. But that's basically the turning point, when inner Earth started existing. And that's why we have cities like Shambhala, pronounce it however you want, and Shangri-La, which are cities that started in Lemuria, but then they got transported to the inner Earth, and they continue to exist there. So these Lemurian seeds that chose to stay with Earth because they love her, and she loves them as well, and they managed to commune so powerfully. And also kind of like Earth needs them to stay with her, because they can anchor a lot more beautiful energies. But they didn't want to go through the same fate as the rest of the human collective. So it was decided that they go within the Earth, where they are a bit more protected, and their humanity will not fall. Because they were doing so great. And the Divine Feminine was so proud of them. And they were given this type of life. They exist within the Earth. in its core, and it's the inner earth. So these are the inner earth humans. Their lifespan is a lot longer than the lifespan of the surface humans. They still exist to this day. And like someone who is 70 years old in inner earth can function just as beautifully as a 20-year-old on the surface. Their bodies don't decay. They get white hair, but their bodies don't decay. They are at another level because they never fell. Because they managed to anchor in all the beautiful energies from that time. And like I said, they were doing so great throughout Lemuria that they were given this choice of, okay, you can still stay here with Earth and you'll never fall. Beautiful. Beautiful. Their bodies did as well get a bit more materialized, a bit more material than they used to be in ancient Lemuria. But their society and their mentality and their way of life is high above the way of life of the humans of the surface. Okay, so that happened. Lemuria got sunken and transported within the earth. And that's how we get inner earth. And then part of Lemuria, that the part that didn't get sunken, merged with the Asian continent. And that's how you get India. And that's how you get the Himalaya mountains. Well, basically the Himalaya mountains existed at the edge of Lemuria anyways. From before. So that's India basically. And that's also why India has such a powerful spiritual tradition, because it's so ancient and it's so protected, and we need it to get back to the roots of humanity, basically. And everyone should learn the wisdom of the Hindu scriptures and the wisdom of the Hindu notions. Because, like, I hear so many people today in the New Age and other spiritual communities, they use all sorts of nowadays words that for me are just no. Like, we're living in a simulation. No, we're living in Maya. We're living in the world of Maya. It's not a simulation, it's Maya. That's a whole other topic. I'm gonna discuss about that at another time. Okay. So that was Lemuria. And the humanity of Lemuria, and the humanity that was more in tune with the divine feminine way of life. After the fall of Lemuria, like I said, basically, Lemuria had to give way to a more masculine way of life, and that's where Atlantis comes in. And a lot of people, when they hear about Atlantis, they may picture Atlantis like something like very ancient cities, like ancient Greek cities or stuff like that. But Atlantis was very advanced. The technology of Atlantis was like, because it was a land of divine masculine consciousness. So Lemuria was the land of the divine feminine. Atlantis, it was the land of the divine masculine. And that's like even the way they fell shows this, because Lemuria fell because it had to give way to the new way of life for humanity, and also because like the souls that failed in Lemuria, like failed to access higher knowledge and wisdom. They failed because they were easily fooled, because they were gullible, which is one of the negative manifestations of feminine energy, unfortunately. But that's because feminine energy is rooted in kindness and just... I don't want to dive into that. All right. Atlantis fell because more and more people of Atlantis were taking black magic, and they were getting corrupted through masculine ways. Like they were getting corrupted as themselves. They were becoming abusers. Whereas with Lemuria, it wasn't the same. Like the Lemurians that experienced bad stuff did that because they were abused. And like they were manipulated by dark entities and dragged into that. Obviously not all of them. Some of them still, like, they had free will and they were a bit more masculine in their energy and they did that. It's a whole conversation. But yeah, my point is that most Lemurian souls, like most of the human souls that came through the timeline of Lemuria, did great. They're amazing. Then it was Atlantis. Atlantis was in the area of the nowadays Pacific Ocean. It was in between Europe and Africa and the Americas. It was in between them. And everyone knows the story of Atlantis, of the flood. But that's not it, because it wasn't just one flood with Atlantis. It's a whole thing. Okay, I'm gonna take a little break and get back to it. Alright. So, Atlantis was very advanced. But it wasn't like, it wasn't like Lemuria fell and got sunken and then Atlantis appeared. I'm sorry. The time of Lemuria, like, it's not that the rest of the earth was not inhabited throughout the time of Lemuria, but it's just that Lemuria was the center of the earth, if you want to say so, at that time. That was the leading area, the leading spiritual area, where a lot of the important events were happening. And Atlantis existed starting with the mid-age of Lemuria, and started evolving and evolving. And when Lemuria fell, shortly after, Atlantis reached its peak and had its time of glory. And afterwards got corrupted. So the time of Atlantis, like I said, when Atlantis started being the center of the world, the spiritual center of humanity, the humanity of Atlantis was very illuminated in a masculine way. They were a lot into technology, but not the kind of technology we have nowadays. A type of technology that was more in touch with spirituality. But that's basically the time when humanity was starting to develop its mind. Because, like I said, Lemuria was a time of divine feminine way of life, when it wasn't such a must for humans to, develop their mind so much as it was required for them to develop their heart space and to develop their spiritual abilities and explore their spiritual abilities in a material world. Like I said, they had more access to for a very long time in Lemuria, humans had a lot more access to their energy body than they were using their material body, their physical body. And it was as far as they could actually teleport themselves to different, I know it sounds crazy, but they could actually teleport themselves to different planes of existence. Like they could literally teleport their spiritual bodies on the Pleiades and other places, and then come back to their material body that existed in Lemuria. Some of them, depending on how powerful they were spiritually, could teleport themselves entirely, like with their physical body, but they couldn't stay for long. They had to come back. Okay. Now, in Atlantis, they didn't have access to their energy body that much. So, throughout Lemuria, we have a humanity that, like I said, starts existing materially. And literally, it starts with 90% energy body and 10% physical body. And the physical body develops and develops and develops. And you can guess it, the percentages start to change. So we have 80% energy body and 20% material body, 70% energy body, 30% material body. That's the longest time span of Lemuria, when humans had 70% energy body, 30% physical body. Then 60% energy body, 40% material body, and then it got to 50-50. And from that point onwards, more and more evil entities started appearing on the earth. They were called asuras in Hindu scriptures. And if you read the Hindu scriptures, you'll see that they did a lot of nasty stuff, a lot of kind of stuff. And that was basically their role there, to corrupt humanity. And from 50-50, it got to 40% energy body and 60% physical body. That's when the the sails start to shift. At that point, Atlantis starts to rise more than Lemuria. That's when it shifts. When the material body is at 60% and the energy body is at 40%, that's when Atlantis starts to be more prevalent. The civilization of Atlantis starts to be more civilization. Atlantis starts to be more abundant and well, not necessarily more abundant, but more, it starts to go upwards. And upwards in a masculine way. Because that's the time in human history when humans start integrating masculine consciousness, and that's when they understand technology and innovation, and they have access to that by their own. Now, both throughout the times of Lemuria and Atlantis, humanity got visited by beings from other planets. And I'm not talking at like starseeds coming incarnate as humans, as we have nowadays. I'm talking about actual aliens, like people from those planets coming on Earth, visiting Earth, because they were there to guide humans and to give humans part of their own knowledge. Now, for Lemuria, this wasn't happening that much because for Lemuria, we have deities coming incarnate literally as humans, Lemurian humans. And I already gave you some examples. For Atlantis, though, we have a lot of aliens literally coming there to really teach humans about technology, really evolved technology that is in tune with spirit. Because again, at that time, humanity didn't fully lost its contact with spirit. And then when we get to 30% energy body and 70% material body, Lemuria is gone. So when the shift was happening from 40% to 30% energy body, Lemuria was starting to disappear. Because the Divine Feminine cannot tolerate that anymore. The Divine Feminine cannot tolerate a world with such little access to divine energy, to spiritual world and to actual energy, because that's what the Divine Feminine is. Pure energy. So the way of the time was paved for a more masculine way of life on Earth. So you can see that it's actually the opposite. The longest time span for Lemuria was with 70% energy body, 30% material body. That was the longest time span for Lemuria. For Atlantis, it was the opposite. The peak of Atlantis was with 30% energy body, 70% material body. And this happened for a while. They kept it at that. They kept the scales of the balance at that, 30 with 70%. And eventually, because humans were using their physical body more than their energy body, and they were having less access to their energy body, like the majority of humans were having less access to their energy body, and they were using mostly their physical body. They started doing magical practices. And out of that came black magic. So a lot of Atlantean people started using black magic, and they were given warnings time after time after time. Stop doing that. It's not okay. It's not okay. They were doing that for their own gains. And they didn't stop. So they had to be stopped. And that's when the first sinking of Atlantis happened. There were 4 episodes of Atlantis sinking. It didn't just disappear like with one event like Lemuria. It was in episodes. So the first sinking of Atlantis, it was a portion of Atlantis. It was parts of the edges of the continent. This wasn't quite the flood. And the population of Atlantis got shaken a little bit by that. Some of them stopped for a while. Some of them started behaving for a while, but eventually got corrupted again. Now, obviously, it wasn't all of them that were doing black magic. It wasn't all the people of Atlantis that got corrupted. But just enough to count. And a lot of them were men. A lot of them were dark priests. All right. And then the second sinking of Atlantis happened. And at this time, it was a bigger chunk of Atlantis that was sunken. It was basically a natural cataclysm. But it was obvious that it was coming for a reason. And like I said, at this point, it was a bigger chunk of Atlantis happening. And already by the second cataclysm, Atlantis was half the size it had originally been. So it was about time for them, to start asking some questions. Some of them did. Some of them didn't care. Some of them kept going. Now, some time passed again, and this time it was a longer period of time. Like, it was a lot longer than the time between the first 2 cataclysms. The first 2 cataclysms were quite close to one another in terms of time, and it was quite obvious like they're linked, but the third cataclysm happened a lot later because they were given a choice and they were given some more time to do better. Now at the time, like shortly before the third cataclysm, there were rumors, because a lot of the white sages, a lot of the good sages, could get visions. And when I say the white sages, I don't just mean the priests, like the men, also women of the time. I was incarnate at that time, and we were getting visions, and there were rumors amongst us. But we were told not to let that spread, not to let that knowledge spread, because if that knowledge was to spread, the bad guys would have fled Atlantis. So for a very long time, like people were unsure, like the initiates and the people who could have visions and could decode the signs. So already for 80 years before my time in Atlantis, there were rumors and many people were uncertain. There were stories, but and people were gathering mostly in secret, and gratefully at that time there wasn't humanity was not as stupid as it was today, and people of wealthy and influential families, there were people of wealthy and influential families who were still very spiritual and anchored in light and love, and they had high functions, high status, and jobs of influence within the city. I was part of such a family, and because of that, we could use our influence to help some people flee Atlantis, because that's what was happening at the time. Basically, a lot of white sages were getting visions and downloads and dreams. Flee Atlantis. I'm getting goosebumps right now. Flee Atlantis. Take as many people as you can. Flee Atlantis. Because something bad is gonna happen. Something devastating is gonna happen. The third cataclysm of Atlantis was... the second and the third were the most violent. The second cataclysm sank the biggest chunk of the land of Atlantis. But it wasn't as violent as the third. The third cataclysm sank a smaller portion compared to the second cataclysm, but it was more violent, more destructive, especially because at this time, the parts of the continent that were about to get sunk were major cities, and actually the capital was about to undergo that fate. And not just the capital, but a lot of the major cities were about to get sunken. Cities where the light of Atlantis used to be. I remember these words, where the light of Atlantis had been. There were portals, there were pillars, there were obelisks and temples in all of those cities. And those cities were getting corrupted by more and more, the presence of more and more stupid people, mages of the dark. And we were trying to fight against that, but it wasn't quite working, because we were, again, kind of, the scales were not in our favor that much. So we had to flee. And when I was incarnate at that time, I remember there were rumors of priests, of white priests, fleeing Atlantis at night on ships with kind of 80 people. A lot of people wouldn't believe those rumors. People who didn't want to believe these rumors. What I did, and not just me, but it was a whole group of people, because I was part of a wealthy family, gratefully. I was a part of such a wealthy family. We could gather a lot of people, on very big ships. It was the biggest exodus, if you want. Not exodus, it sounds bad, I don't want to call it that way. Biggest migration from Atlantis to another land, and it was exactly Egypt. It was into Egypt, the ancient Egypt. And that's exactly why I tell you, the legend of Osiris being the first pharaoh, it's true. He was the first pharaoh. He was part of a family coming from Atlantis. And we all fled Atlantis because we were getting continuous visions of what was about to happen to Atlantis, and we were about to leave. So Osiris was the first pharaoh because we established a new city and a new way of life on another continent. And Osiris was the ruler, the political ruler of that land, with a lot of like the whole state apparatus was with all those wise people from Atlantis that were anchored in love and light. It was great. So that's how it was like back then in Atlantis. And that was the third third cataclysm, and that is what caused a flood in so many other areas. And what was left of Atlantis after that third cataclysm was just an island. Just an island out of a whole continent. Now it was just an island. And Plato, the ancient philosopher, called that island the island of Poseidonis. Eventually, even that island got sunken because the people of Atlantis just couldn't get it. They just couldn't get it. And you get this, you get this type of divine intervention throughout multiple stories of ancient times, even in the Bible, with cities such as Sodoma and Gomorrah, and even the time of Moses, when that was a lot later. The Pharaoh of Egypt, talking about Egypt, it's like initially when Egypt was founded, it was a time of brightness and good intentions and love. But it got corrupted throughout time. And during the time of Moses, you have a pharaoh that is quite a bad guy. And he is told to stop doing what he was doing. He doesn't want to listen. And because of that, there are numerous punishments coming from divinity because he doesn't want to listen. And this keeps happening to humanity. And you see it even in the book of Revelations. And it shows that humanity is punished for its deeds. But the attitude that humans are having is to blame God, instead of taking a look at themselves and choosing to do better, which it's such a human thing to do. Like, go blame someone else for your own stupidity. I mean, yeah. So, that was Atlantis. And the people who fled Atlantis fled in multiple directions. And that's how you get different Atlantean colonies, both in the Americas And like I said, in Northern Africa, where we went, also the Mediterranean, you get the Minoan civilization, which is such a beautiful, beautiful time in European history. Because all of those groups of people that were fleeing Atlantis were fleeing with a lot of knowledge of what it means to have a very well-functioning society. Atlantis was a land defined by this cities, beautiful cities, amazing cities, built exactly because people were already a lot more intelligent, a lot more knowledgeable of how to build a city, both in terms of its material aspect and its less material aspect, its more administrative aspect. And like I said, that's why, you know, when we moved, Osiris was the pharaoh of the first pharaoh of Egypt, because the whole group of people had the knowledge of what it means to function as a prosperous society. It was beautiful. And like I said, all the colonies of ancient Atlantis took that knowledge with them where they moved. So that's the time of Atlantis, a time defined by more and more knowledge, humanity gaining more and more knowledge and expanding their minds more and more, which is a very great thing to do, but that came at a great cost, the cost of so many humans getting corrupted. And that's exactly why Atlantis was eventually sunken. The monarchy model, the model of Atlantean monarchy was also a very good type of, a very good model of monarchy. And like I said, state building. And the capital of Atlantis was very, very beautiful. That's where I lived. It was very beautiful. It was in circles. So there were multiple circles of water all throughout the city. It was a circular city. And it was very beautiful. All right. Now, even though it fell, and even though a lot of human souls got corrupted throughout the timeline of Atlantis, a lot of other souls gained a lot of knowledge throughout that experience. And basically Atlantis, just like Lemuria eventually paved the way for Atlantis, Atlantis also paved the way for what we know as official history, as the latter part of humanity's history, which is what we can collect from written sources, historical sources that we have available today. So these are the first three major phases of humanity that I want to put the focus on. So it's the Garden of Eden humanity, just spirit. Gaia was not just spirit. Gaia was materialized already by that time. But the humans walking on Earth through the Garden of Eden era were just soul. And then we have Lemuria. Then we have Atlantis. So we have just spirit. Then we have Lemuria. And like I said, Lemuria is the land of divine feminine consciousness and embodiment and way of life. Again, This doesn't mean that it was the only place on Earth populated by humans at the time. There were humans in other areas as well, but that was the leading area of the time, and that's why I call it the time of Lemuria. And it was a long, long time, probably the longest. It's actually the golden age of humanity. Then we have Atlantis. And the time of Atlantis was shorter than Lemuria, but definitely longer than our perceived notion of history today. And then after Atlantis, we have what we call Antiquity nowadays. And then after Antiquity, we have the Middle Ages and the modern era, and then the contemporary era. So bear with me a little bit. I wanna draw this out. I wanna have two drawings. Okay. So we have here, let's say this is Lemuria, in what we would call the Far East today. But it's in the south, in the east and south. It's significant. And then we had Atlantis, which was more to the north, which was in the west, but more to the north. Again, it's significant. It was higher geographically than Lemuria. Lemuria was also bigger than Atlantis, right away. So Lemuria is lower geographically, which is feminine energy. Masculine is above and on the right. Feminine is below and on the left. Makes sense, right? Okay. So these are the two geographical, these are the two places that were the leading areas of different eras of humanity. For the Garden of Eden type of humanity, it was the whole earth. Then we have Lemuria, then we have Atlantis. From Atlantis, there were multiple migrations, like I said, but the most important one is in ancient Egypt. So the focus moves to Northern Africa. Okay, we have Africa here. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna draw the actual shape of the continent. Oh, it looks so bad. This drawing looks so bad. Okay, we have Africa. And then from Atlantis, we have a migration to Northern Africa, where we have Egypt. And it's on the Nile. It's on the Nile. Very important, because the valley of the Nile, it's gonna have such a powerful spiritual presence for humanity. And throughout the next era for humanity, this is the leading area. But it's shorter this time. It's not like the timeline of Lemuria. The timeline of Lemuria was the longest. Then we have the timeline of Atlantis, the leading area. Then the leading area for humanity as a collective, where the most important waves of shifts in human consciousness happen in Northern Africa. Throughout ancient Egypt, how it used to be, in its original form, in its purity. But at the same time, we have something happening in Asia. My pen is not drawing anymore. All right. We have in Asia the beginning of the most powerful corrupted state. Well, arguably the most powerful corrupted state was Atlantis, actually. But after Atlantis, we have Babylon. This is not right. I didn't draw it right. I'm sorry. This would be kind of where Russia is. Babylon would be here somewhere in Mesopotamia. Babylon, like, and everything that happens between the two rivers, because that's exactly what Mesopotamia means, the land between the two rivers. Do you see how it's so important, the river? That's exactly why I pointed to the Nile for ancient Egypt. And actually, when you look at history, the whole story of ancient Egypt, like, Egypt is exactly described as a gift of the Nile, because in that area, life wouldn't have been possible without the Nile and the floods of the Nile that were making the land fertile. Now, in Mesopotamia, there were two rivers, Tigris and Euphrates. And let's draw them like this. And that's what Mesopotamia means. It means the land between the rivers. That's where it started. And eventually we get the full Levant area. And it's basically kind of Middle East. The Levant is kind of Middle East. This is where big time corruption started happening for humanity. And this is throughout history. The next ages of human history will be affected by geographical areas of corruption a lot more than by geographical areas of goodness and kindness and love and spiritual evolution. Because that's how it was throughout the time of Lemuria. That's how it was throughout the time of Atlantis initially. And then Atlantis got corrupted. And then we get Babylon. Alright. Now, from Babylon, the whole scheme is gonna move to the Mediterranean. And we're gonna have the Empire of Alexander the Great. And then, guess what? The Roman Empire. So, from Babylon, the land of highest importance for humanity's consciousness eventually moves into the basin of the Mediterranean. And it's still the Middle East, and that's where we get, Jerusalem, and that's where Jesus comes incarnate. And that was the last astrological era, the time of Pisces, basically. Throughout the time of Pisces, we had the Middle East as the leading geographical era for humanity. Then, throughout the age of Pisces, it moved from the Middle East more and more into Europe. And eventually Europe got to rule the world. And it's kind of like the opposite of Lemuria, because Lemuria had no interest in gaining territories outside of itself, basically. Because of the legacy of Babylon. Now, Babylon is basically everything that happened in Babylon. This is where official history tells you that civilization began. And the land between the two rivers and the Levant is called the cradle of civilization. And it couldn't be further away from the truth. But somehow it is the cradle of corruption in the way that we know it today. It is the cradle of corruption in the way that we know it today, because all those bad guys, like corrupted alien species, resided here. And they corrupted Atlantis initially. Atlantis was basically a land that received both good alien species and bad alien species throughout time. And just as much, both good souls coming incarnate as Atlantean humans and bad souls coming incarnate as Atlantean humans. And then more and more bad, like evil alien species, Anunnaki and reptilians, set their eyes on Babylon area, on Mesopotamia. It was fertile. Atlantis was gone. Egypt was already taken. So they moved. They set their eyes on Babylon area, the land between the two rivers. And that's exactly why you get these empires of like Babylon, Assyrians, Sumerians. All of these ancient empires are empires, like really empires, because before Babylon, humanity had no notion of empires, no notion of conquering other territories. Even when people were moving, like what I said, with us moving from Atlantis to ancient Egypt, we moved into an area that was not inhabited. So we didn't take land from other people. Like, humanity had no notion of territorial conquest prior to this. But the more the bad guys got access to human consciousness through the corruption of Atlantis, they could use their influence more and more on humans. And in the land of Babylon is where a lot of humans pledged an oath of slavery to those bad guys. Yes. There was a time, again, official history doesn't talk about this for a reason, but when the bad guys really settled in the Sumerian settlements, they really made like really big cities. But if you look at the Mesopotamian cities, it's not like Egypt. It's not like Minoan civilization. Egyptian civilization and Minoan civilizations are direct descendants of good Atlantean monarchy, whereas Babylon, it comes from the bad guys. It comes from those species of aliens that really have that model of politics, imperialistic politics. Basically, both the Anunnaki and the reptilians, they have on and off alliances with one another. And And what they do throughout the galaxy, if the Anunnaki don't want to just, they don't want to limit themselves to this galaxy alone. The reptilians, they are content with this galaxy alone. But what they do is basically they want to conquer land from other places, from other planets. That's their scheme. The planet of reptilians is a very dark place, a place of very low consciousness. Almost all of them are evil. Like almost all the souls of the reptilian collective are evil. And they don't really have that much life force of their own anymore because they're rooted in evil. So they need to go to other planets to take slaves, literally. And that's where the model of imperialism and slavery comes from. Humanity wouldn't have come with that by itself. Because, again, remember how humanity was in its original state. It was beautiful. And humanity in itself, this type of humanity is, again, it's Gaia is a feminine being. The being that is associated with the heart chakra, the mother goddess of the solar system. It's the moon in astrology rules our emotions and our heart space and families and all of that. So humanity by themselves wouldn't have come up with this whole thing, because humanity by themselves wouldn't have quite fallen that drastically. Because again, remember, human souls are seeded for Gaia by this sun. And this sun is Vishnu himself. So, if like human souls, as shitty as humanity has gotten to be today, human souls wouldn't have gotten here without this influence. I mean, they might have gotten corrupted by themselves, but probably not that drastically. Because there would have been a lot more beautiful human souls anchored in patience and love and kindness to balance things out. So in ancient Babylon, especially throughout the Sumerian age, when more and more of the Anunnaki and reptilians, at that time the Anunnaki and reptilians had a very good alliance. And they were settling in that area. And if you look at the settlements, if you look at the buildings there, you will see that those buildings, they scream masculine energy. It's as if they only come from masculine energy, because that's, they do, like they only come from masculine energy. If you look at the buildings of ancient Babylon, ancient Sumer, ancient Mesopotamia, the ziggurats, yes, they're amazing, but you know, like to some degree, it kind of shows the background of the origin of those cities and those monarchies. So the humans of the time pledged, the humans of the time and of the area pledged allegiance to those dark entities. And many of them were set into place as kings, but they were ruling on behalf of those beings. And many of, like the first kings of this corrupted area were actually the Anunnaki themselves, and then hybrids. Because this is a time of severe genetic experimentation. And those humans that allowed themselves to be experimented on, basically their bloodline got so heavily influenced. And throughout time, you will see these bloodlines move across Earth, and it's gonna move into nowadays Europe and then nowadays USA. Because later on, from Europe, we have the USA, which is nowadays Babylon. So the movement of the scheme of corruption is basically Babylon, the Mediterranean basin, then Europe, and then from Europe to North America, primarily USA, which is, like I said, nowadays Babylon. So this is in terms of geography, the history of the leading areas for humanity that have shaped the history of humanity and the evolution of humanity as a species and the collective. We have Lemuria, we have Atlantis, when the paradigm shifts and it breaks into two. We have the migrants, you can say so, from Atlantis going into Northern Africa, Southern Europe, and Central and North America. And then you have the bad guys settling into Babylon. And then corruption just takes more and more roots into humanity, into human consciousness. And from this time onwards, we get slavery and we get empires. We get political territorial conquest. We get countries that want to conquer other countries, because this is exactly what the reptilians do. The Anunnaki are gonna feed on that, and more and more bad stuff, basically. So you know that whole narrative with, like, again, so many people nowadays accusing white people of imperialism and colonialism, and they had so many slaves, and shut up. It was just a descendant of a far older model brought to humanity by other beings. Okay. So, for the Age of Pisces, like I said, it was the Middle East, the land of leading spirituality. And that's why Jesus was born there. But afterwards, throughout the Age of Pisces, it moved into Europe. And, well, we all know what happened. And then we have, on the corrupted side, today we have North America with the USA as being the leading political area of humanity. But that's not the leading spiritual area of humanity. Because after Atlantis, they split. Throughout Lemuria, it was the same thing. Leading spiritual and leading political area was the same thing. At the beginning of Atlantis, again, it was the same thing, because Atlantis was good and the most politically important. Once Atlantis got severely corrupted, the most important spiritual area moved to Northern Africa and the Mediterranean basin and stayed there until the Age of Pisces, when Jesus was born there. But the leading political area moved to Babylon, and then Southern Europe with Alexander the Great and his empire, and then the Roman Empire, and then the Western European countries and their empires, and then moved into the USA. So that's the leading political areas throughout time, from antiquity into the modern day. The leading spiritual area stayed, like I said, once Atlanteans moved into northern Africa, it stayed there, and the Middle East. And today, guess where it is? Guess where is me? It's in Eastern Europe. Yeah, I know. Surprise, surprise. Surprise, surprise. The leading spiritual area for the world throughout this time is going to be Eastern Europe. For a very long time, I was like, why was I born in Eastern Europe in this life? And after I learned this about Eastern Europe, I was like, oh well, it makes sense now. Okay. This is one drawing, just so we have a picture of the areas geographically. Now, let's have an image of things in terms of time and not space. So that was an image of space throughout human history. Okay, so this is the wheel of time, basically. We have the golden age at the top. Okay, we have the golden age at the top. And this is the longest age for humanity. We're gonna paint it, draw it like that. So, from the time when humanity started existing, the 0 point of humanity, like I said, it was the time of the garden of Earth as the Garden of Eden, and then humanity got into the material world. And here we have Lemuria. Okay, this is the golden age, when humanity is into Lemuria. And that's why the time of Lemuria is the longest, because the golden age, gratefully, is the longest. Then we have Atlantis. And at the bottom, we're gonna have the Dark Age. In between the Golden Age and the Dark Age, there are 2 more ages. So we're gonna paint them like, we're gonna draw them like this. I know it doesn't... No, it's okay. The Golden Age is the longest. It's okay. Okay, so the time of Atlantis. So you can see that at the beginning, with the time of Atlantis, humanity was still in the upper part of the circle. And then it got to the midpoint and it started really descending into more and more evil and more corruption. And then it got split when we have the 2 major influences for humanity, the good influence and the bad influence. And then we have this time which is, let's say, Egypt and Babylon. Egypt and Babylon. In here we have, in this time, We have Egypt and Babylon as the most important. And well, Egypt and Northern Africa and South Europe, basically. It's kind of like the Mediterranean somehow. We have the good influence and the bad influence, basically, in two areas, two separate areas. But somehow they're gonna clash at one point. And then we have the Dark Age, which is the time when Jesus came incarnate. And the lowest of the low point, it's when, you know, Jesus got crucified and all of that. And then we're coming out of that time. So we have one dark age here, that's a descending dark age. Humanity hits its lowest point and is redeemed by the sacrifice of the divine masculine coming incarnate as Jesus. He is sacrificed basically for the benefit of humanity. And then we have another dark age that is an ascending dark age. And then we're gonna have replicas of these two eras. We're gonna have another age of two lands of influence, one corrupted, one good. So we're gonna have Eastern Europe. / America as the land of corruption. When I say Eastern Europe, I don't mean Russia, okay? Because Russia is fucked up as well. I mean Eastern Europe as in the people coming incarnate in Eastern Europe, the land in itself, the area in itself of Eastern Europe anchoring in more and more light energies. And more people coming incarnate in Eastern Europe to shift the paradigm. Because there's this thing that, okay, you come incarnate in the West, and I'm not saying there aren't tough karmic loads within many families in the West. There are, but a lot more families from Eastern Europe have that kind of karmic load, of bad karmic load in Eastern Europe because of communism. So even though we have today more and more light workers, like the numbers of light workers coming incarnate in the West are bigger, because there were 3 waves of light workers. And the first wave was primarily in the West, because during the first wave of light workers coming incarnate amongst humans, it was at the time when Eastern Europe was under communism, so it was worthless for the first wave of light workers to come incarnate in Eastern Europe, because Eastern Europe was still under communism. So the first wave of light workers comes incarnate primarily in the West and maybe other countries as well. Then we get the second wave of light workers who are coming incarnate a bit more in other areas. And then the third wave of light workers, more and more of the third wave of light workers are coming incarnate in Eastern Europe as well. But the karmic load here is even more drastic because of what happened to people throughout communism. So it's a bit of more karmic intensity here, and we have to purge that. So congratulations to all of the souls who came incarnate in Eastern Europe to purge that heavy karmic load. Congratulations to all of you. You did a great job. It was tough. Again, this is not to say that the rest of the light workers, like, this is not to say that anyone is lesser than, I'm just pointing out that there was a heavier karmic load in Eastern Europe because of certain historical factors that made it a lot tougher in certain ways. But we're doing it, and it's great. Okay, and afterwards, this is basically the nowadays, okay? When we have Eastern Europe versus America, it's the time of judgment, basically. It's the time predicted in the book of Revelation. So finally humanity gets out of both of the dark ages, the descending and ascending dark ages. And because of that is the time of total purging. And that's when we have the second coming of Jesus and all of that, all those things predicted in the book of Revelations. It's the end of times, the times as they were before, the times of fallen humanity. Remember the story of the Bible, right? When humans lose heaven, lose the Garden of Eden, and they take a bite of the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. So this is the descending timeline of humanity, when humanity gets more and more materialized, more and more denser in both body and consciousness. But that is for a purpose. The purpose is, again, like I said, the 0 point of humanity, when they were given the choice, are you gonna go through the world of incarnations and samsara so that you gain knowledge and a will of your own, so that with this will of your own you can choose love and kindness and peace by yourself? And many human souls said, yes, we're gonna go through this. So this descending timeline has happened. We are here at the time of judgment, at the time predicted in the book of Revelations, when humanity is judged, finally judged. The souls that are deemed worthy are gonna continue existing in the ascending eras, when humanity will go back into the spirit world. At this time, individualized, wise, and powerful, strong within themselves. So much so that, as I said, they choose love and kindness and peace by their own. They don't need the will of higher beings for that to happen. They have their own will, trained by now through all of these events, all of this history, all of these things. They have trained themselves to understand what happens when they don't choose that, and what happens when they do choose that, and what they do with that knowledge afterwards. So throughout this descending timeline, most human souls were not erased from existence. They were allowed to keep existing because it was a time of learning. Throughout the descent of the material world, descent into darkness. But throughout this darkness, it's a time of gaining strength and gaining personal power. So what do you choose? This is the time when the question arises and divinity finally judges humanity. What do you choose at this point? Will you stand in your sovereignty? Will you choose that? Because only the souls who choose that will be allowed to continue living and coming incarnate in the next ages for humanity. The next age is gonna be an age where, like, it's a replica of Atlantis, but it's in the opposite. So, throughout the falling ages, here we already have the two areas of influence, but the one gaining more and more influence was the one rooted in darkness, Babylon. And then, like I said, from Babylon to the Mediterranean basin, to Europe, and then to America. But that's it. This is the line. It all ends. Babylon started here, it ends here. Babylon ends with the USA. That's the final version of Babylon. So if here Babylon won, here it's gonna lose. And the line of spirituality that's gonna start from Eastern Europe here, it's gonna continue growing throughout this timeline for humanity. And I don't know what it's gonna be. I don't know what area is gonna be here and what's the name of that. But it's gonna be a replica of Atlantis. It's the opposite of Atlantis. Because again, remember, Atlantis started beautifully and then got corrupted. So here, we're still gonna have some little bit of corruption left for humanity from the previous ages, but it's gonna be purged and transmuted and integrated into more love, more kindness, more peace, more understanding, more illumination, more enlightenment, more all of that good stuff. So that finally, once humanity crosses this threshold, it has somewhere like 25% corruption left. And then it can integrate that more easily and more easily and more and more. And then we can finally go back into the golden age. And if this was a golden age of materialization, this is gonna be the golden age of dematerialization for humanity. When humanity is gonna get back into the spirit world, gonna get back merged with the sun again. And from there onwards, continue existing as individual souls with a will of their own throughout the spirit realms. So this is the whole scheme that's happening for humanity, and this is the actual history of humanity. This is the actual history of humanity with those territories and geographical importance and influence and all of that. Now, you don't have to be Eastern European here to be part of the shift. It's just that Eastern Europe is gonna give certain, like, very powerful and important souls are gonna come incarnate in Eastern Europe to pave the way and to anchor in those pillars of knowledge and those pillars of change for the consciousness of the collective of humanity. Okay. This has been the history of humanity. From this perspective, this is the grand scheme, the grand circle. Now, within this circle, there are other circles of their own. But maybe it's not the time to go into that. Because, like, basically, this golden age has a circle of its own. This golden age, this has a circle of its own. This has a circle of its own. And so on. So, this is the macrocosmos, and this is the microcosmos. You can look at it like that. So, if we take each era, each age in particular, we're gonna see different influences through that era as well. But I don't want to focus on that now. We're just gonna focus on the big scope, on the big picture, on the big circle of humanity. The 0 point, total spirit existence, materialization, densest form of humanity, and then dematerialization, and coming back into spirit as a collective. By this point, all human souls that are not... So, this is the thing. This is the time of judgment. Here, now. All of the souls that don't deserve to keep existing are going to be erased from existence at the end of this incarnation and this time. In the book of Revelations, it is said that Jesus will erase these souls from the book of life. The book of life is literally life, it's literally existence. So these souls are going to be erased once and for all. That the souls who really have no chance, they're never gonna choose light. They're never gonna choose love. They're never gonna choose enlightenment. They're always gonna stay on the path of evil. They're gonna be finally erased entirely from existence. Yay, gratefully, finally. Throughout this time, most of human souls, regardless of how far they went, they were not erased. Most of them. There have been a few, 2 or 3 souls that just went too far. And divinity, Jesus said, no, erased, done, gone, no more like you. We don't like you. And it's Jesus who does that. Well, Jesus is basically the incarnation of the divine masculine. So, it's the divine masculine and the divine feminine who do that. They are the only ones who have absolute power of destruction. The sun can also do that. Vishnu can also do that with human souls because they come from him. But that's not necessarily one of his attributes. So most of the times when erasing souls from existence needs to happen, it's the divine masculine and the divine feminine doing that. But again, Vishnu can do that as well. Other deities can do that as well. But it's mostly an attribute of the one. Okay, so after these souls that are never gonna choose light and never gonna choose love, after they are erased, what's left of humanity are the souls that eventually will be angelic beings, all of them. This is great, right? This is amazing. It's great news. But it's gonna happen after this whole transition. So by this time, when humanity dematerializes itself fully, they're gonna merge with the spirit world at the angelic level. They're all gonna be angels. Yay! So, congratulations to all the human souls who are going that path, who are doing it, and who are going to become angels by the end of all human existence. Congratulations to all of you. Okay, this has been the video. I hope it was helpful. I hope it was useful in understanding some things and why you're here and what's the higher purpose for the collective at large. Okay, I hope you liked it. Keep shining.